The Pacific had never been kind at night. Out there, hundreds of miles from the nearest shoreline, the sea turned into an endless plain of shifting black, restless and alive. The Argo Dawn, a trawler with paint long stripped by salt and storms, creaked under the weight of another night's catch. Rain lashed at the deck. Lightning illuminated the horizon in jagged bursts, giving the illusion that the ocean itself was cracking open. Captain Torres stood at the helm, a cigarette trembling between his lips. The storm had not been on the forecast. Then again, the Pacific often ignored forecasts. At 58, Torres had spent his life riding tempests, but he still spat to the deck for luck whenever thunder rolled too close. He was a man who carried superstition like armor. On deck, the younger men worked the nets with heavy gloves and tired shoulders. Mateo, barely 23, leaned over the winch as they hauled in the final drag. His eyes glittered with the same wonder that had carried him to sea against his mother's warnings. "The ocean's full of things we haven't seen," he would always say. That night he was about to be proved right in a way none of them expected. Elias, the oldest hand on the crew, stood near Mateo. His weathered face was marked by deep creases, carved by decades of sun and salt. He had the air of a storyteller, someone who never saw the ocean as just water, but as a graveyard and a cradle, a place where secrets waited. As lightning split the sky, he muttered, "The sea doesn't like being watched." The winch groaned. The net, dripping and heavy, swung aboard, spilling fish across the slick deck. Silver shapes thrashed in dying spasms, but amid the chaos lay something still, something no one had ever seen before. At first, Mateo thought it was glass, an orb of translucent green shimmering faintly under the deck light, but as he bent closer, he froze. The thing was a fish, barely half a foot long, with a body of soft black flesh and a skull entirely clear, like a bubble of glass. Inside the dome, two tubular eyes glowed emerald, shifting slowly like periscopes. "What the hell?" Mateo whispered. Elias knelt beside him. The fish didn't thrash. It just floated in the puddle of seawater, its strange head tilting as if it were deliberately studying them. In the dim glow, its brain was visible, a pale green mass suspended in liquid. Torres leaned out of the wheelhouse. "Don't touch it. Throw it back, now." But no one moved. The crew gathered, rain forgotten, mesmerized. The fish's eyes rotated, locking onto each of them in turn. Each gaze felt lingering, invasive, as though the creature wasn't just looking, it was seeing. "It's a barreleye," Elias murmured almost reverently. "I've heard stories. Fishermen say they live where light never goes. But no one ever sees one up close." Mateo, transfixed, whispered, "It looks intelligent." Lightning slashed across the sky. For a heartbeat, the storm's glare turned the fish's glass skull into a prism, scattering green light across the crew's faces. For that brief moment, the deck was filled with dancing shapes, warped shadows stretching across the wet boards, shapes that didn't belong to any of the men standing there. Elias's eyes widened. He crossed himself. They say creatures like this, their eyes don't just see the sea, they see beyond it, into places we're not meant to know. The crew laughed nervously, brushing it off, but the unease clung like wet clothes. Mateo scooped the fish into a spare water tank. Torres cursed, but didn't stop him. It was easier to let curiosity burn itself out than argue against it. Still, the captain's hands trembled on the wheel as thunder cracked overhead. As the storm raged, the men retreated inside, leaving the Barreleye pulsing faintly in its tank. Outside, the ocean hissed and groaned, a restless beast beneath the rain. Inside, the glow from the fish painted eerie reflections on the walls. Torres poured himself a shot of rum and muttered, "Bad omen. Should have tossed it back." Elias sat across from him, shaking his head. "Maybe it's not an omen. Maybe it's a messenger." Mateo didn't sleep that night. He sat by the tank, watching as the fish hovered silently, its gaze always tilted upward, as if tracking something above the water, far beyond the wooden ribs of the trawler. Sometimes its eyes flicked sideways, following movements Mateo could not see, and in the quiet moments between thunder, he swore he heard it, a sound faint and strange, carried by the hull, not the groan of waves, not the rattle of the storm, something else, a low, almost melodic hum. It rose and fell like a choir far away, muffled by leagues of water. Mateo pressed his ear to the tank. His breath fogged the glass, and the fish's green eyes flared brighter, as if in response. That night, when he finally drifted into uneasy sleep, the ocean followed him. In his dream, he was no longer on the trawler but suspended in black water, weightless and small. Around him loomed vast pillars of glowing light, like cathedral spires built from currents. The Barreleye hovered before him, its head casting emerald rays that cut through the void. From the shadows, shapes emerged. Not fish, not human, something in between, tall and fluid, with bodies that bent like water. They formed a circle, swaying to the rhythm of that same hum, a resonance that rattled in his bones. One of them stepped closer. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness, and in that darkness Mateo saw himself reflected, as if the ocean had swallowed his image whole. He woke with a start, gasping. The storm had calmed outside, but the hum lingered in his ears like an echo, and in the dim glow of the tank, the Barreleye was still watching him. The morning after the storm, the Pacific lay calm, but the calm was not comforting. The crew of the Argo Dawn moved about the deck with stiff silence, each man stealing glances at the tank where the Barreleye floated. The fish seemed different in daylight. Its transparent head refracted the sun into sharp green flares that streaked across the walls like blades of light. The men avoided the beams as though stepping into them might cut. Captain Torres lit another cigarette, though the pack was nearly gone. His voice was gravel when he said, "We're rid of it today. Dump it overboard before it curses us all." But Mateo stood firm, clutching the rail of the tank. "We've got something no one has ever captured alive. Do you know what that means? Marine biologists don't fish these waters," Torres snapped. His eyes were red, sleepless. "They don't bury men lost to freak waves or hear the cries in the fog. We keep it, and it drags us down with it." The others muttered agreement, but no one reached to lift the tank. Fear, curiosity, and greed locked them in a strange paralysis. That was when Elias spoke, his voice low, like a prayer. Long ago, men told stories of glass-headed watchers, said they rise only when the sea has chosen someone. Not for death. He paused, eyes darting toward Mateo, but for revelation. Mateo frowned. What kind of revelation? Elias shook his head. The kind no man survives unchanged. The words sank into the crew like hooks. Some crossed themselves, others laughed nervously, but every man felt the chill. By noon, the ocean grew strange again. The compass needle quivered and spun. The radio cracked with static. The sonar, usually steady with dots of schools and distant whales, displayed only emptiness, a blank void where life should be. Torres slammed the console. Damned equipment! Salt water's eaten the wiring. But his voice lacked conviction. On deck, the Barreleye pulsed brighter, as though reacting to the instruments. Its tubular eyes rotated upward, then sideways, tracking something invisible. That night, none of the crew could sleep. Mateo dreamed again, though he never closed his eyes. The hum was there, rising from the hull, vibrating through bone. He sat in the galley, staring at the tank, when Elias joined him. "You hear it too," Elias said softly. Mateo nodded. "It's like singing, but not human." Elias poured them both a shot of rum. His hands trembled. "In the Azores, I once heard an old whaler tell of voices beneath the sea. He said they belonged to those who built the abyss. Not gods, not men. Something older, something that uses fish like messengers. He pointed at the tank. "That thing? It's not just a fish. It's a mouthpiece." Mateo shivered. "For what?" The old man didn't answer. He only drank. By dawn, another sailor, Ruiz, stumbled into the mess hall, pale and sweating. "I saw it," he muttered. His eyes darted wildly. "In my dream, a city made of glass towers, glowing green, buried under black water. And they were waiting, looking right through me." Mateo's blood ran cold. His dream, his cathedral of light, the same vision. Word spread quickly. 3 more crewmen admitted they had seen the same dream. Shadows circling, eyes gleaming inside skulls of glass. One man refused to describe his nightmare, but he didn't stop shaking all day. The Barreleye, as if mocking them, drifted in slow circles, its gaze never breaking. The tension broke when Ruiz tried to smash the tank with a wrench. Mateo tackled him before he could swing. The crew dragged them apart, curses flying, fists raised. Torres threatened to lock them both in the hold. "Enough!" Torres roared, his face slick with sweat. "It goes overboard at sunset. No debate, no more dreams. We end this." But when sunset came, the sea changed again. The horizon burned crimson, yet the water beneath the Argo dawn shimmered with unnatural green light, faint but undeniable, rising from below. The men, gathered at the rail, hushed. The glow wasn't phosphorescent plankton. It was structured. Lines, arcs, shapes moving in perfect rhythm like the outline of something vast. Mateo gripped the tank. The Barreleye's eyes rotated downward, fixed on the glow, then upward again, locking on him. Elias whispered, "It's calling." "Calling what?" someone asked. The hum grew louder, no longer faint. It rattled the hull, vibrated the air in their lungs. Tools on the deck clattered. Plates in the galley shattered. The green shapes below sharpened into angles, towers, arches, an architecture that could not exist, shifting as if it breathed. And then, from the depths, shadows rose, long, slender figures moving with unnatural precision, their outlines bending with the water. Too tall, too deliberate to be fish. The Barreleye pulsed brighter, its glass skull a beacon. Mateo felt the gaze of the crew burning into him, but he couldn't look away. The fish wasn't just alive, it was a signal, a key. Elias's voice broke the silence. "The omen has chosen, and it's not the ship. It's him." He pointed a shaking finger at Mateo. The crew staggered back, crossing themselves, muttering prayers. Torres drew his pistol, knuckles white. "Whatever this is," the captain growled, "we cut it loose now, or we all go under." The hum surged, drowning his words, and the sea itself seemed to lean closer. And in that terrible moment, Mateo realized, the thing below wasn't just watching, it was waiting. The night stretched long, haunted by the glow rising from the trench. None of the crew slept. Every man heard the low hum, felt it vibrating in marrow and blood. Even Torres, defiant as he was, kept the pistol within reach and his eyes darting to shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Mateo sat by the tank, unable to pull his gaze from the Barreleye. Its green-lit eyes rotated with impossible calm, tracking the movements of something unseen outside the hull. Each time the glow below flickered, the fish responded as though echoing it. Elias crouched beside him. His voice was barely a whisper. "You feel it, don't you?" Mateo nodded. His skin prickled. The hum wasn't just sound, it was communication, a rhythm of pulses, almost like language. "I don't just hear it," Mateo said. "I understand pieces of it, like instructions." Elias stiffened. "What instructions?" Mateo swallowed. "To dive deeper, to see." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Elias recoiled, crossing himself. "Madness," he muttered, though his eyes betrayed fear, not certainty. By dawn, Torres called the men together. His voice carried the harsh authority of a captain, but his hands shook. "We're cursed," he barked. "That thing isn't natural. We cut it loose today. End of story." But half the crew hesitated. They whispered of the dreams, visions of towers of light, glass palaces breathing in the dark. For them, it wasn't curse but revelation. "We've seen it," Ruiz argued, his face pale yet burning with obsession. "Down there, something alive, something ancient. We're chosen to witness it. To throw it away is to blind ourselves." Torres slammed his fist against the rail. "We're fishermen, not prophets." The deck erupted in shouts. Men shoved each other, fists rose, knives flashed at belts. Only Elias's cracked shout silenced them. "Listen, the sea has chosen him." All eyes turned to Mateo. He froze, feeling the weight of their gaze. Some looked at him with reverence, others with loathing. He wanted to deny it, to laugh, to scream that he was just a man. But the fish pulsed brighter, and the hum surged in his bones. That evening, the fog thickened until the world shrank to the length of the deck. Shapes moved within it, too tall, too fluid. Torres ordered the lights on, but the floodlamps flickered, then died with a hiss of burnt wires. The sea below began to glow again, brighter than before, shifting in geometries that hurt the eyes. The crew stumbled back, shielding their faces. Mateo, entranced, stepped forward. The Barreleye's gaze pinned him. He heard whispers, clear, intimate, inside his head. "We built the trenches. We carved the abyss. We see through you as through glass." His breath caught. "Who are you?" he whispered aloud. "Not who. What remains?" Visions stabbed into his mind. Colossal beings drifting through ancient seas, heads crystalline and filled with light. They watched empires rise on land, watched them crumble, never interfering, until something, some catastrophe, drove them into the trench, their memories sealed within the Barreleye's strange anatomy. Mateo staggered. The fish wasn't merely alive, it was a vessel, a shard of intelligence, a surviving archive of something vast. The whispers pressed harder. "Bring us back. Dive, and we show you the city eternal." When Mateo returned to the crew, his face was pale, his eyes unfocused. Elias saw it first. "You spoke with them," he breathed. The others recoiled. "He's possessed," one hissed. "The fish has him." Torres raised his pistol. "Step away from the tank, Mateo." But Mateo didn't move. "It's not a curse," he said, his voice steady though trembling beneath. "It's knowledge. They've been waiting, for someone who can hear them. If we dive, we can see the truth of the ocean. A city beneath all this, alive still." "You're insane," Torres growled, but already Ruiz and others nodded. "I dreamed the city," Ruiz muttered. "He's right, we all did. It's real. They want us." The crew fractured before Torres's eyes, half pressed toward Mateo, drawn by the glow. The rest backed away, clutching knives, swearing the fish would doom them all. The hum crescendoed, vibrating through the steel hull until rivets screamed. From the fog, shadows brushed against the ship, long limbs that left no ripple yet scraped like claws along metal. The Argo Dawn groaned under pressure not of water, but will. Torres cocked the pistol. His voice broke as he shouted, "We end this now!" Mateo stepped forward, eyes blazing green in the reflection of the Barreleye's glow. "No, Captain," he whispered, "we begin." And with that, the sea itself seemed to answer. The storm had become a living thing by the time the trawler pushed farther into the night. Waves clawed at the hull with monstrous hands, and every timber groaned in protest. The deck tilted sharply as salt water cascaded across it, drenching the men who struggled to keep their footing. Above, the sky was a black void, the stars erased, the moon swallowed whole. All that remained was the relentless roar of the ocean, as if some colossal throat had opened to swallow them alive. Inside the cabin, the fishermen huddled in a ragged circle around the glass tank, their clothes dripping, their breaths sharp and uneven. The thing inside floated in eerie silence, its dome-shaped head glowing faintly like a lantern hidden beneath layers of glass. They had hauled many strange catches from the Pacific before: squid with translucent skin, lanternfish that glowed like candles, creatures with teeth too sharp for their tiny bodies, but nothing like this. The Pacific barreleye looked fragile at first glance, almost delicate. Its body was short, dark, and unremarkable, but its head was something unnatural. A clear dome of flesh enclosed its eyes, which rotated within like emerald orbs in a crystal sphere. The men had gawked when they first saw it come up in the net, some laughing, some crossing themselves, but now, as the storm raged harder, the laughter had died. Mateo, the youngest of the crew, leaned closer, his nose nearly pressed to the glass. His breath fogged the surface as he whispered, "It's watching us." The others shot him irritated glances, but no one moved to stop him. He raised a hand and tapped the tank lightly. At that instant, the creature twitched. Its eyes swiveled upward, glowing brighter than before, as if some current of power had passed through it. The glow spread, filling the dome like phosphorescent oil. Mateo stumbled back, his eyes wide. "Did you see that? It moved." "It's just a fish," grunted Raoul, the first mate, though his voice cracked with unease. "A freak of the deep, nothing more." But even Raoul could not deny what followed. The storm's rhythm seemed to change. The crashing of waves against the hull fell into a strange cadence. Boom, 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 as though echoing the beating of a drum. Then a low hum filled the cabin, so faint at first it might have been mistaken for the wind. Yet it carried a metallic resonance, unnatural, vibrating through the walls. The captain, a grizzled man named Ortega, slammed his palm on the table. "Enough of this. Throw it back. Now." No one moved. Their eyes were locked on the fish. Its glow intensified, two shafts of green light cutting through the glass dome of its skull. The beams struck the walls, painting every face in the cabin with a sickly radiance. The men's shadows warped across the planks, twisting like grotesque marionettes. "Mother of God," one whispered. Mateo clutched his ears suddenly and cried out, "It's singing!" The others laughed nervously, but their voices lacked conviction. Ortega barked an order, and Raoul and another man rushed forward to lift the tank. Yet, as their hands gripped the sides, a deep vibration rattled through the ship, so powerful that the lanterns hanging from the ceiling swung wildly. The hum had grown louder. It was not coming from the fish alone. It was rising from the sea itself. They froze, listening. The sound was like a choir, hundreds of voices rising from beneath the waves, layered in harmony, too perfect, too alien. Each note pressed into their skulls, into their bones. It was music no human throat could ever create, vibrating with an otherworldly resonance. On deck, the storm seemed to pause. The wind dropped for a heartbeat, the rain slowed, and the ocean beneath them shimmered with streaks of pale green light. The men rushed outside, driven by both fear and fascination. They staggered across the slick deck, clutching at ropes and rails, and stared into the depths below. Shapes moved in the water, vast, coiling shadows that writhed like serpents. One after another they emerged faintly from the glow, circling the trawler like predators drawn to blood. The men gasped and crossed themselves, some shouting prayers, others cursing loudly into the night. Ortega seized the wheel and shouted above the din, "We're leaving! Hold on tight!" But the vessel barely responded. The currents had shifted, pulling them toward a whirl of green-lit water. Mateo clutched the rail, eyes fixed on the tank below deck. "It's calling them," he whispered. "The fish. It's a beacon." Raoul struck him across the face. "Shut your mouth, boy." But Raoul's hands shook as he said it, his voice thin with terror. The humming swelled to a roar, so loud it drowned out even the storm. The very planks beneath their feet vibrated, the screws in the steel hull rattling like bones in a grave. Then, as the men staggered to keep their balance, the fish's dome glowed brighter still, flooding the deck with light, and the ocean answered. A massive shadow surged upward from below, larger than the trawler itself. The water bulged as though the sea were breathing, rising and falling with the slow rhythm of some colossal chest. The men clung to the rails, their eyes wide, their throats tight with screams they could not release. The storm had not summoned their doom. The fish had. As the first enormous shape broke the surface, glowing with bioluminescence, the men realized the truth. What they had mistaken for a fragile deep-sea oddity was not prey at all. It was a signal, a key, and whatever had waited in the abyss for countless centuries had now heard its song. The sea erupted like a wounded beast. Water heaved upward, sending torrents across the deck, and the trawler groaned as if caught between the jaws of something immeasurable. Lanterns swung violently, their flames sputtering in the salt-choked air. The crew clung to the rails, eyes fixed on the monstrous silhouette breaking the surface. It rose slowly, impossibly, as though the ocean itself birthed it. At first, they saw only a curve, an arc of translucent flesh glistening with veins of light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then came the ridges, enormous and ridged like cathedral spires, covered in colonies of glowing organisms that blinked in sequence, a language of light the men could not decipher. The creature's body seemed endless, stretching far beyond what the storm's lightning revealed. Mateo screamed, not from pain, but awe. "It's alive! It's all alive!" The others shouted curses, prayers, fragments of words that vanished into the roar of the sea. Ortega, the captain, forced himself to the helm, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly that blood seeped from his palms. "Hold steady!" he shouted. But the trawler was no longer under his command. The currents dragged it inexorably toward the Leviathan, as if the ship were a mere toy caught in its wake. Below deck, the Barreleye's tank pulsed with light, the glow synchronizing with the rhythm of the beast above. Each time the giant's body throbbed, the fish's dome flashed brighter, like a conductor leading a cosmic orchestra. The humming, no, the singing, reached new heights, vibrating through every nail and board of the vessel. Raoul staggered into the cabin, teeth clenched. He seized the tank, lifting it with a grunt, and made for the deck. "We throw it back," he roared, "or it takes us all." But as he stepped onto the slick planks, the light surged, blinding him. His body convulsed, muscles seizing as though invisible hands had gripped his spine. The tank slipped from his grasp and shattered against the deck. Water poured out in a glittering wave, and the Barreleye slithered free, its fragile body somehow unharmed. The men recoiled in horror as the fish writhed, its glowing dome scanning, turning, locking on to each face. Its eyes swiveled upward, and the choir below answered with a unified, thunderous note that nearly burst their eardrums. The Leviathan leaned closer, its surface breaking fully into view. It was not a single creature. Dozens, no, hundreds, of colossal forms emerged from the depths, each different yet bound by the same design. Translucent domes, glowing cores, eyes that rotated within glassy skulls. An empire of living lights, rising from the trench, called forth by the song of the fragile creature now flopping helplessly on the trawler's deck. Mateo dropped to his knees, hands clutching his head. It's a colony, a city. They're all connected. Ortega drew the pistol he kept strapped under his coat. His hand shook violently, but his eyes burned with grim resolve. He pointed it at the wriggling Barreleye. "If this thing is their key, then we end it now." He pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the storm. The bullet struck the dome of the fish's head, piercing the translucent flesh. For an instant, silence reigned. The glow flickered. The song faltered. The men dared to breathe. Then the ocean screamed. A sound unlike any thunder tore the night apart, a shriek of rage from countless throats. The Leviathans convulsed, their bodies writhing with furious light. Waves slammed against the trawler, splintering wood, ripping lines free. The ship pitched dangerously, nearly capsizing. Mateo lunged forward, cradling the wounded fish in his arms as though it were a child. Blood mixed with seawater ran across his chest. "No, you don't understand," he cried. "It's not their leader, it's their messenger. We've silenced their voice." The men staggered back, faces white with terror. Raoul clutched a rope, shouting above the cacophony, "Then what do we do, boy? We're already dead." The glowing empire circled closer. Their lights strobed in violent patterns, stabbing into the fishermen's eyes, searing images into their minds. Visions flashed, cities of glass deep in the abyss, towers carved from living bone, corridors filled with unearthly choirs. The men collapsed one by one, clutching their skulls, screaming as alien images carved themselves into memory. Only Ortega remained standing, teeth bared in defiance. He fired again, the shot lost in the storm. He fired until the pistol clicked empty, useless against beings larger than the ocean itself. The trawler's hull cracked. Water poured in. The vessel tilted dangerously, the bow rising as the stern sank. Men scrambled, some leaping overboard into the roiling sea, only to vanish beneath glowing coils. Mateo staggered to his feet, clutching the dying fish. Its dome flickered weakly, its eyes dulling. He shouted into the storm, words lost in the chaos. "Listen to me. Let me carry it back. Let me return the voice you lost." For one terrifying heartbeat, the storm paused. The glowing creatures halted their advance, suspended in the churning water. Every eye turned toward the boy holding the fish. The choir dimmed, becoming a low, resonant hum. Ortega stared at him, disbelief etched into his weathered face. "You can't bargain with monsters." But Mateo's expression was different. No fear, no rage, only reverence. He pressed his forehead to the fish's dome, whispering something the captain could not hear. Then, with trembling hands, he lowered it back into the sea. The effect was instant. The glow spread through the abyss like fire through dry brush. The fish dissolved into the water, its body unraveling into threads of light that sank into the leviathan circling below. The choir swelled again, not in fury, but in triumph. The storm's winds faltered, the waves softened, and for the first time in hours, silence fell. The empire of light lingered for a final moment, surrounding the trawler. Their domes glowed in synchronized rhythm, a pulse that echoed like a heartbeat across the sea. Then, one by one, they descended, vanishing into the black depths, leaving only faint streaks of green fading into nothingness. The sea lay still. The rain slowed to a drizzle. The storm was gone. The trawler floated, broken but afloat, its men dazed and silent. Raoul wept openly, clutching the rail. Ortega dropped to his knees, pistol slipping from his grasp, eyes fixed on the horizon where the lights had disappeared. Mateo stood alone at the bow, hair plastered to his face, his eyes glowing faintly with a reflection not his own. The abyss had spared them. But its message was clear. It had been waiting. It had been listening. And now it had been heard. Dawn broke with a fragile calm, the sky painted in bruised shades of violet and gray. The storm had vanished as suddenly as it came, leaving the trawler adrift on an unnervingly placid sea. Broken planks and tangled nets hung from the rails. Smoke rose faintly from the cracked engine room. The men, exhausted and hollow-eyed, moved about like phantoms, tending wounds, counting who was lost, who remained. They did not speak of the lights, or the voices, or the visions carved into their skulls. Not yet. Words felt dangerous, as though to name what they had seen might summon it back. Mateo stood at the bow, still as stone. His clothes were soaked, his skin pale from the cold night, but his gaze was unshakable. He stared not at the horizon, but downward, into the abyss that had nearly claimed them. And when Ortega approached, he saw it. The faint glow in the boy's pupils, shimmering like green fireflies in the depths of his eyes. "You're not the same," Ortega muttered. His voice was hoarse from shouting against the storm, but his tone carried no anger. It was something closer to fear. Mateo didn't flinch. Neither are you." The captain clenched his jaw. He had survived decades at sea, weathered hurricanes, lost friends and ships alike. But nothing had shaken him like what he'd witnessed the night before. "What did they give you?" he asked. Mateo's lips parted, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he whispered, "They wanted to be heard." For days, the trawler limped back toward land, patched together with rope and desperate hands. The men whispered when they thought Mateo wasn't listening. Some said he was blessed, chosen by whatever empire lay below. Others claimed he was cursed, marked by the abyss itself. At night, while the others slept fitfully, Mateo would hear it, the faint hum of the choir, not outside, but within. The tones resonated through his skull, pulling at his thoughts, filling him with flashes of alien cities, spirals of glowing architecture, vast cathedrals of living bone. It was not madness, not entirely. It was memory, shared across unfathomable distances. When the trawler finally reached the harbor, they expected relief. But the port felt foreign. The air seemed thinner, the sky dimmer. None of them could shake the feeling that they had left something of themselves behind in the trench. Fishermen who saw the battered vessel whispered rumors before the crew even set foot on shore. Some swore they smelled sulfur. Others claimed to see green light flicker beneath the waves as the boat approached. By the time Ortega stepped onto the dock, stories were already spreading, of a cursed voyage, a boy who carried the abyss in his eyes, a choir that sang storms into existence. The authorities questioned them, demanded explanations for the damage and missing crew. Ortega spoke carefully, choosing his words with a survivor's cunning. He said the storm was fierce, that men were lost to the sea, that they were lucky to return at all. He did not mention the glowing empire, nor the song, nor the way his nightmares were now filled with visions of glass-headed creatures staring back at him. But secrets do not stay buried long. Weeks passed. Men who had survived began to drink heavily, their minds unraveling. Some swore they could still hear the hum in their sleep. Raul vanished one night, his bunk empty, his boots left behind. Tracks led to the water's edge, but no one saw him again. Another crewman hung himself in a boathouse, his suicide note filled with strange symbols drawn in green ink, spirals that twisted like the domes they had seen. Ortega tried to hold them together, but his authority meant little now. They were marked men, and every fisherman in the village knew it. Mothers pulled their children away when the crew walked past. Priests muttered prayers as the men entered taverns. And then there was Mateo. He spoke less and less, but when he did, the others listened with uneasy reverence. His voice carried a strange cadence, as if harmonizing with a note only he could hear. At night, green light sometimes leaked from under his door, painting the dockside with eerie luminescence. Finally, Ortega confronted him. "What are you becoming?" Mateo looked up, his expression unreadable. "Not what. Who? They're teaching me." The captain's heart sank. "Teaching you what?" Mateo's eyes gleamed. "How to listen." Not long after, he disappeared. His bed was empty, his belongings untouched. On the dock, footprints led toward the water's edge. Fishermen swore they saw him walking into the tide, the sea parting around him, until he sank below without a struggle. That night, the choir returned, not in rage, but in a mournful hymn that echoed through the bay, rattling windows and chilling bones. To this day, sailors whisper of the boy who carried the abyss in his eyes. They say he walks still, beneath the waves, among the empire of light. Some claim to see a faint glow in the water on stormy nights, pulsing like a heartbeat. Others swear the ocean sings back to them when they call Mateo's name. The abyss had waited. The abyss had been heard. And now, through Mateo, it would never be silent again. Do you dare listen to the song of the abyss? If this story of the Methane Choir shook you, there are countless more waiting beneath the waves. Tales of ghost ships, forgotten empires, and creatures that defy imagination. Subscribe to Terra Uncharted now, so you won't miss the next descent into the unknown. Turn on notifications, because the ocean keeps its darkest secrets where few dare to look. And tell us, would you have thrown the fish back, or kept it, knowing what followed?